Natasha pressed her fox-like ears flat against her blonde waves as rain pelted the cafe window. Her best friend Diane had canceled their lunch again, the third time this month. She stirred her untouched coffee, her fluffy tail drooping beneath the chair. "Natasha, is that you?" She looked up to see Victor Ashford, Diane's father, shaking off his umbrella. The distinguished older wolf stood before her, his silver-streaked fur impeccable even in the downpour. "Mr. Ashford," she said, managing a smile, "what brings you here?" "Business meeting nearby. May I?" He gestured to the empty seat. Something in his concerned expression made her nod. They talked easily, about everything, except Diane. Victor had always been kind to her during college visits, treating her like a second daughter. When she mentioned needing to move out of her apartment due to her landlord selling the building, he didn't hesitate. "I have a property sitting empty downtown, guest house behind my main residence. You're welcome to stay there while you search for something permanent. No rent. Consider it thanks for being such a loyal friend to Diane all these years." Natasha's ears perked up in surprise. "Mr. Ashford, I couldn't possibly. Please, it would ease my mind knowing someone trustworthy is watching the place." His warm brown eyes held genuine concern. "Diane's mentioned how stressed you've been." The offer seemed too perfect, too generous. But Victor had known her for 6 years, had welcomed her into family dinners and holiday gatherings. This was just kindness from a father figure, wasn't it? "I thank you, truly, just until I find something else. Take your time," he smiled, sliding a key across the table. That simple gesture, a key pressed into her palm, felt like salvation. She couldn't have known it was the first step toward destroying everything she held dear. Couldn't have imagined how the warmth of his hand, lingering on hers a moment too long, was a warning she failed to recognize. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the clear lines between gratitude and something far more dangerous. The guest house was charming. Exposed brick, modern kitchen, more space than Natasha had seen in years. She spent her first weekend arranging her belongings, her tail swishing contentedly as she made curtains and hung art. Victor stopped by Sunday evening with a housewarming gift. Expensive wine and takeout from the Italian place she'd once mentioned loving. "You remembered," she said, surprised, her cat-like pupils dilating in the warm lamplight. "You mentioned it at Diane's graduation party, 3 years ago." He set the bags on her new counter. "You said the carbonara reminded you of studying abroad." Something fluttered in her chest, dangerous and unwelcome. She pushed it down. This was Diane's father, her friend's father. They ate together, conversation flowing like the wine. Victor asked about her graphic design work, her dreams of opening her own studio. He listened, really listened, in a way her ex-boyfriend never had. In a way Diane, lately absorbed in her new relationship, hadn't in months. "You're incredibly talented," he said, studying the portfolio on her tablet. His shoulder pressed against hers as they sat on the couch. "These designs are remarkable." "Thank you?" Her voice came out softer than intended. She noticed the silver in his dark fur, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way his presence filled the room with quiet confidence. He stayed until midnight. When he finally left, Natasha stood in the doorway longer than necessary, watching him cross the garden to the main house. Wrong. This felt wrong, but also intoxicating. Over the following weeks, Victor found reasons to visit. Checking the water heater, dropping off mail delivered to the wrong address, bringing coffee on mornings when he'd seen her lights on early. "You work too hard," he said one Thursday, setting a latte beside her computer. "Learned from watching successful people like you." His hand found her shoulder, squeezed gently. The touch lasted 3 seconds too long. They both knew it.
Neither pulled away.
It happened on a Friday night. Diane had invited Natasha to dinner, then canceled via text, again. Natasha sat alone in her guest house, hurt morphing into anger. 6 years of friendship, and lately she felt like an afterthought. Victor knocked just after 8. Diane mentioned she canceled. I thought, you shouldn't be alone tonight. He held up a bottle of wine, and I could use the company. Evelyn's away at another conference. Evelyn, his wife. Diane's mother, the woman who'd always been kind but distant, who traveled constantly for work, leaving Victor alone in that big house. They shouldn't. Natasha knew they shouldn't. Just 1 glass, she heard herself say. 1 glass became 2. 2 became the bottle. Conversation deepened, charged with electricity neither could ignore. Victor's hand found hers. She didn't pull away. This is wrong, he whispered, but his thumb traced circles on her palm. I know. Her ears flattened, her tail still. We should stop. We should. Neither moved. The space between them evaporated. When his lips found hers, Natasha surrendered to the forbidden wanting that had been building for weeks. His hands tangled in her blonde waves, careful of her sensitive ears. She gasped against his mouth as he pulled her close. They moved to her bedroom in a haze of shed clothing and whispered confessions. His touch was reverent, experienced, everything her younger boyfriends had never been. She mapped the planes of his body with trembling hands, knowing this would change everything, and powerless to stop. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets, reality crashed over her like ice water. Oh God. Diane. Evelyn. What have we done? Victor's arms tightened around her. I know, but Natasha? He turned her face to his. I haven't felt alive like this in years. The worst part? Neither had she. They told themselves it was once. Just once. A mistake driven by loneliness and wine. But twice more that week, Victor found reasons to knock on her door.
The affair consumed them. Stolen afternoons when Evelyn traveled, late nights after Diane went home to her own apartment. Natasha hated herself, hated the way she watched for Victor's silhouette crossing the garden, hated how alive she felt in his arms. Leave her, Natasha whispered one evening, immediately regretting it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said. You think I haven't considered it? Victor's voice held agony. Every single day. But Evelyn doesn't deserve this. Diane doesn't deserve this. And you? He cupped her face. You deserve better than sneaking around with someone twice your age. Don't tell me what I deserve. Her ears flattened in anger. You started this. We both did. The guilt was eating Natasha alive. She couldn't look Diane in the eye anymore. When her friend finally did make time for lunch, Natasha mumbled excuses and left early. Are you okay? Diane asked, concerned. You've been so distant. Fine, just work stress. The lie tasted like poison. Everything shattered on a Tuesday. Natasha was working from home when her door flew open. Diane stood there, tears streaming down her face, her expression devastated. Tell me it's not true, her voice cracked. Tell me you're not sleeping with my father. Natasha's world stopped. Diane, Mother found texts. She's known for weeks. She hired an investigator. Pictures, dates, times, everything. I'm so sorry. I never meant. You never meant? Diane's fury erupted. You were my best friend, my father. How could you? How could either of you? There were no words, no explanation that could excuse what they'd done. Natasha stood frozen as Diane's pain transformed into cold hatred. You have 3 days to get out. This is still our property. Diane's voice turned to ice. And Natasha, I never want to see you again. You're dead to me. the door slammed. In the silence that followed, Natasha collapsed to her knees, her tail wrapped around herself, and finally let the tears come.
The fallout was immediate and devastating. Evelyn filed for divorce. Diane cut off all contact with both Victor and Natasha. The whispers started, in their social circles, online, everywhere. Natasha moved into a cramped studio across town, the place she could afford on short notice. Victor tried to help financially, but she refused. She'd destroyed enough. "I lost everything," she told him during their last meeting, in a coffee shop far from anyone they knew. "My best friend, my reputation, my self-respect. I'm divorcing Evelyn. We can finally what?" Her laugh was hollow. "Be together? Build something on the ruins of your family? Victor, I'm 28. You're 53. Diane will hate us forever. Evelyn's life is destroyed. What we had, it was never real. It was just temptation and loneliness. You don't mean that." But she did. Or she had to, anyway. The woman who'd accepted that simple gesture, a key, a favor, had been naive enough to believe in kindness without consequences. Now she understood that every choice echoed, that betrayal poisoned everything it touched. 6 months later, Natasha saw Diane's engagement announcement online. Her former friend looked radiant, surrounded by family, except Victor, noticeably absent. The caption read, "Celebrating with the people who truly love me." The exclusion was intentional, absolute. Natasha closed the laptop and stared at her reflection in the dark screen. Blonde waves tangled, fox ears drooping, eyes rimmed red. She'd gained clients and rebuilt her career, but the cost had been everything else. Victor texted occasionally. She rarely responded. What was there to say? That she'd learned too late how a moment's weakness could become a lifetime of regret? That some gestures, no matter how simple they seemed, carried weights too heavy to bear? Outside her window, the city moved on, indifferent to her pain. Natasha wrapped her tail around herself and tried to remember who she had been before that rainy day in the cafe, before one kind offer had turned her entire life upside down, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake.